5 tips and tricks to achieve a natural looking hair system. We all want it, don't we, guys? The most natural appearance for our hair system because it just looks right. It just looks subtle. So I'm going to be sharing my 5 top tips to get you to where you need to get to. And the great thing is you don't have to spend a fortune. Now, before we dive headfirst into this exciting content, if you're new around here and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that like and subscribe button. It will help the channel grow. It means I can make more content for you guys. Also, I just wanted to let you know that I have opened a online consultancy service for hair system wearers who have got questions for me. It's basically a one-on-one with me. You get half an hour and I'll answer any questions you want. It's all done over Zoom. That's £60 and that's $75 American. You can find information about that in the description box below. And now let's talk about natural looking hair systems. So tip number 1 from me is you need to get the base right. You need to make sure if you want a really natural looking hair system that you prioritize getting lace over poly. Yes, ultra thin skins are pretty good and pretty invisible, but if you want the best, you want to go lace. So I'm talking Swiss or I'm talking French. These are the 2 most common types of lace. They're also the 2 most invisible. Now, the system that I'm wearing right now, it's actually a silk base, but it's got a frontal that's French lace. And as you can see, it's fine. You can have it up if you want, or you can have it down. Swiss is more subtle than French, so that's worth considering if you're looking for the most natural. It's also ever so slightly more expensive, and it doesn't last quite as long. So that's definitely worth bearing in mind, but it does give you the most natural appearance. If you like to have your hair up, Swiss or French is the one for you. And now tip number 2, hot off the press, you want to get bleached knots. Now, what are bleached knots, Adam? Well, bleached knots are basically, by the way, you can't get bleached knots with poly. Again, this is one of the reasons why poly doesn't give quite as natural appearance as a lace. You can do it with lace. It's basically where the manufacturer bleaches the bottom parts of the hairs at the front of your system. And it basically makes it look as if the actual hair is coming out of your scalp. So it is 1,000,000% worth it. Now, most of the time you don't really need to check because most of the lace systems that are on offer available actually do bleach knots anyway. You don't need to make a specific request for it. I know that Realism, for a fact, pretty much all of their French and Swiss laces have an inch at the front, which is basically bleached knots. But I always encourage my viewers to double make sure that you're checking on the website, whatever system that you buy, make sure it's a lace, but make sure it says bleached knots. If it doesn't have bleached knots, I try and find one which does have bleached knots, or try and email the manufacturer and say, look, I like this system, but do you offer a bleached knots option? There is also an option to bleach the knots yourself. It's not something I'd recommend if you're within the first 6 months to a year of wearing a system because it's not that easy and you don't want to mess up your system. So I'd always recommend just trying to make sure that the manufacturer offers that as part of the service. Coming in at number 3, we need to talk about density. So by density, I mean density of the actual system itself. It needs to look realistic and appropriate to your age profile. Now, I've certainly revised my view on densities over the years. And now I'm at the point where no matter what age you are, I would never go higher than 105%. Now, this particular system is a 95%. It tends to suit my age profile. I'm 35-year-old, male, still got the natural colour pigment in my side hair. So 95% actually works quite well. And it really matches my side hair pretty well as well. That's something else to consider. If you have really, really thick side hair, I'd probably go for 105. Okay, but I wouldn't go higher than that. I think if you're in your 30s or your 40s, a 95% is absolutely fine. I think anything beyond 105, even if you're 21, 22, in my personal opinion, you're open to your opinion, but in my opinion, I just think it's a little bit too thick. On the flip side of it, you don't want to go too thin. You don't want to go too thin if you're in your 30s like me, and you don't want to be going for like a 60%. In my opinion, it's just too thin. That should be reserved more for people in their 50s and their 60s. Now, if you want to go even more specific than that, you can always look at the custom options. Realism do it. Multiple other manufacturers offer a custom service. I always just wear stocks, but this seems to match with my side hair and it just doesn't look too obviously thick. Now, number 4 is getting a pretty thin base. And I mentioned Swiss at the beginning, at the top of this video. Swiss is the thinnest lace you will get, but it's also the most natural looking base that you will get. So it's really, really worth considering. It's not something I'd get if you're within the first 6 months of wearing hair systems. It's something that I would deem an experience, more appropriate for an experienced wearer. So a year plus you've been wearing systems, I think at that point you can look at going into like getting a Swiss or a French, because not just is it harder to get the bond right, it's also a bigger cleanup job, and it's easier to get kinks in the hair system itself. So I would wait that out if you're early in your hair system journey. If you're more experienced, a year, 12 months plus, go for it, because it gives a real natural look. And also, when you're feeling it around here, you can barely feel it. So if you've got your other half, or you're having a one night stand and you don't want them to know that you're wearing a system, a Swiss or a French is actually really quite good, because it's very hard to tell the difference between the natural hair and when the base of the system starts, because it's so thin. And number 5, and this is a subtle one that not many people think about, but quite a lot of people can get it wrong, getting the blend right. I learned the hard way. I used to cut my own hair, guys, and people who have been following me on this journey for several years, you'll know how bad my cuts used to be, and that was because I did it myself. Since then, I've been seeing a barber who just cuts my side hair, does a really great skin fade, and the blend just looks so natural between the actual system and the natural hair. And when you get that blend right, it's undetectable. So you might want to consider that. Now, at this point, guys, I know that you may not have a barber willing to do this in your area, or you may feel a little bit anxious going in to see a barber and say, look, I wear a hairpiece or a wig. And I mean, I certainly had a ton of anxiety around that. I got lucky, actually, that one of my wife's friends is a hairdresser, and my wife spoke to her about me wearing a system, and she was like, oh, he should come in, I can cut his side hair. So I got lucky, and it does take balls to actually go into somewhere and be like, look, I wear this thing, can you just cut my side hair? So I do totally get the anxiety that comes around that, the possible shame or embarrassment. I totally get that. But if you want a really good natural looking hair system, I think seeing a barber to cut the sides and blend it with your hair system, or seeing a hair system stylist, is a real must. If you've got to part with your money, make sure you're investing it on something that's worthwhile. And that really is, in hair system terms, that really is worthwhile. So in summary, guys, my 5 tips for achieving a natural looking hair system are: number 1, getting the base right, preferably prioritizing a French lace or a Swiss lace. Now, if you're early on in your hair system journey, I'd actually recommend getting a hybrid, so a poly perimeter with a poly in the middle and then a lace at the front. Much easier to maintain, but also at the front looks really natural. Now, number 2 is making sure that the system has bleached knots. Now, you can only get that with lace bases. Most manufacturers already do it, so they will basically bleach the knots for you the first inch of the front of the hair system. And you can get this with hybrids as well. Just make sure when you're looking at the system you want to buy that in the details it says bleached knots either all round the system or bleached knots the first inch. Now, number 3, and this is really important to get this right, is density. To give you an example, this that I'm wearing right now is a 95%, and it seems to match my side hair pretty well. I would say don't go over 105%, otherwise it can look a little bit thick no matter what your age. Number 4, ensure that you're getting a thin base, as thin as possible. Now, it doesn't have to be the thinnest base you can find, especially not if you're in year 1, because those are more delicate, but get something thin, because when you feel it, the thinner it is, the less it's noticeable. And number 5, and an often forgotten one, is getting the blend right between your hair system and your actual natural hair. And that's why I always talk about either seeing a barber to cut your sides every couple of weeks, or getting a hair system stylist to do it, because they know what they're doing. It's really hard for us lay people to teach ourselves how to do blends. I've tried it a million times in the past and it never worked, no matter how hard I practiced. It's also really hard to use mirrors to make sure that you're getting the right spots on the back. So it's a really, really good investment. Highly recommend it. So guys, tell me your thoughts. Are there any other things that you would recommend when it comes to the most natural looking hair systems. Let me know in the comments box below. Let's start a discussion. If there are more things, let me know and I can actually put it into a new video. Cheers for tuning in, guys. If you're interested in seeing actually how a hair system stylist does a hair system, or how a hair system stylist fits a hair system, check the video popping up on the screen right now. I made it last week. You might be interested in seeing how that's all done. It's a very, very interesting and novel process, and I'll speak to you very soon. Bye for now.